Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. For those of you who I've not yet had the chance to meet, my name is Melissa Giller. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here for the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. In honor of the men and women around the world who defend our freedom, if I could ask for you to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You can be seated. So our guest tonight, Gianno Caldwell, has many reasons to be proud. He grew up as one of 9 siblings from Chicago's South Side, being raised by his grandmother in an area fueled by poverty, violence, and low expectations. But he didn't let that stop him. At the age of 14, he began working for the local alderman, an early step into public service that developed his civic engagement and belief in the community's potential, a reason to be proud. He later moved to Washington, D.C., becoming a TV host, and by the time he was 31, a political analyst for Fox News, a reason to be proud. In 2018, he published his first book, Taken for Granted, and he even joined us here at the Reagan Library in February of 2020 to discuss it. The book was an instant bestseller, a reason to be proud. Now, this next one's a little tougher because, of course, he would much rather not be applauded for his efforts if it meant his brother was still here. And as I said earlier, Gianno is one of 9 children. He's the eldest, and his youngest brother, Christian, had a passion for basketball and his grandmother's cooking, and he hugged with enthusiasm, often concluding his hugs with, "I got you." And just 3 years ago, on June 24th, 2022, Christian was murdered at the young age of 18. Nothing could replace the pain of losing his baby brother or get rid of the pain and loss he felt. But Gianno did turn that pain and suffering into good. In 2024, he launched his own company, the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety, which works to ensure a justice system that prioritizes the safety and security of all law-abiding citizens by strategically supporting anti-crime candidates, advocating for legislation, and providing comprehensive support services for victims of violent crime, a reason to be proud. And we know that Christian would be proud too, because although it's in spirit, we see through your work that you are hugging him, whispering in his ear, "I got you." Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gianno Caldwell. Well, thank you for joining us this evening on a topic that isn't so easy to talk about.
Yes. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
So I'll start with an easy question, which obviously is not an easy question.
My name is Gianno Caldwell.
Perfect. Your book begins with the unimaginable loss of your brother.
Yes.
Can you tell us in the audience, for those who haven't read the book, a little bit about your brother and what happened to him?
On June 24th, 2022, my life changed forever when my innocent teenage baby brother, Christian, was murdered in Chicago. And since then, I've been out for justice, not just for him, but for other families across the country who've experienced a very similar tragedy as my family. And you know, when you have this experience, one in which you could never, ever imagine, one in which you would never, ever want to experience for your family or even for others, you do a couple different things. One, you can be in fear for your own life. You can be in a scenario where you just cave up and clam up, if you will, or you can be a person who feels that they have a new purpose in life, and that was what happened to me. So after that experience, I decided, as you mentioned, to start the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety, where we brought on folks like the Attorney General currently for the United States, Pam Bondi, who was then the Florida Attorney General in past, Congressman Burgess Owens, and many, many other folks who believed that it was time for us to step up and change things in this country, because there's been a crime crisis that have taken far too many lives. My little brother, innocent kid, he loved to laugh, he loved to joke, just like I do. For anybody who's seen me on Jimmy Fallon's show, you understand. But I'll tell you, there's so many other families that deserve that light, and that's why I wrote the book, The Day My Brother Was Murdered, My Journey Through America's Violent Crime Crisis, because it's not just about him. It's ignited a new purpose in my life, and that is to save lives.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead for a second because one of my questions, which ties right into that, reading your book, it's crazy. I think you say 150 people
Yes.
were murdered on the same night as your brother's murder across the nation.
Across the nation.
150 people murdered
Yes.
on that date. You picked 8 to tell your story, and tell the story of what you
Yes.
were trying to accomplish in your book. How did you choose those 8?
Well, the fascinating thing, I think, for a lot of people is because of where I work and who I am, there was a lot of light, there was a lot of press, it became an international story. But for many people in that book, they might have been a headline. And actually, my brother was a headline. When it happened on that day, I felt so broken. In fact, I didn't know. It's hard to talk about it, but I must. On that day, I reached out to the network at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon to let them know what happened. And then I thought to myself, you know what, I'm not going to reveal this to anybody or many folks outside of my inner circle of family and friends until perhaps next week. But then it hit me as I slept. The guys who did this are out there. They shot multiple people that night. I need to get out here and post on social media and talk about it so I can get justice for my brother. So 7 a.m. that day, I posted about what happened to my family. But a lot of folks in there, they didn't have that same opportunity. So I write about people like James, who was an Army veteran out of Philadelphia, who had PTSD and who couldn't often sleep at night. He would get up at 2 a.m., go to a park in his neighborhood. And on that day, June 24th, after he told some 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and teenagers, you shouldn't be out here, you should go home.
10 and 11-year-olds.
10 and 11 and teenagers. They beat him to death with a traffic cone. Like, it's unimaginable things that happened. A person like Catherine, who was a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a chemical engineer in Burleson, Texas, who was just going home. And on the highway, that fateful day, a drug deal went bad. These guys, the guy that was selling the drugs was trying to rip off the guy that was buying the drugs, and they figured it out, and they started to chase each other on the highway, and then all of a sudden, her life is gone. Or Malik, who was actually like a good kid, honor roll student. The faculty believed that he was a great kid. He had a very big future. He loses his life on that very day. There's so many other people here and so many stories that I tell, but we all know how bad it is in many places around the country. You can turn on the TV and see that. What I really wanted to focus on is the solutions to the violent crime that exist in our country. So I talked to people like Sean Hannity, John Walsh from America's Most Wanted, Dr. Drew Pinsky on the mental health crisis that exists in this country and its contributions to violence, because it has to stop. My brother's legacy will be more than just an 18-year-old kid that died on the south side of Chicago. His legacy will fuel the saving of lives all over the country.
I love that. And speaking of that, because of what happened to you and your family, how did your understanding of justice, safety, and community in America change?
Would you repeat that question?
Yeah, how did your understanding of justice, safety, and community in America change?
Well, I've been talking about crime and the crime crisis for many years. I talk about it in my first book, Taking for Granted How Conservatism Can Win Back the Americans That Liberalism Failed. So I was already aware, I already knew a lot of the data, but then having had the personal experience of what that's like, to know what it is like to work with the police, the prosecution, the press to try to get justice. And then you got these prosecutors, soft on crime, George Soros-funded prosecutors. Terrible people, I'm gonna be honest. That's how I feel about them, because these are individuals who have enabled an ideology among those who may not have been criminals. They start off with something like, you can steal up to $999 worth of items and no one can stop you. Right? That's where it starts. These are all steps. So as you begin to do that and you get away with it, what do you do next? You carjack, you rob, maybe you put a gun up to someone's head who wouldn't give you that wallet and you kill them. That's a problem. And that's why there must be a highlight on these George Soros-funded prosecutors, which I'm sure everybody in this room are very familiar with George Soros and the damage he's done to our country. I'm certain of that. we have to ensure that these folks no longer have an office to be in. Alvin Bragg is a good example of that too, in New York City.
So this book is so important because it shines the light not just on these victims, but on the different types of crime we have in this country and how we need to face it. How hard was it emotionally to write? Did it give you, I mean, closure is a silly word, but did it give you closure?
No, it didn't, and it was extraordinarily difficult. And when I first started out, I thought maybe I can write about my brother because I'm more familiar with his story than any of the other stories in the book. But that was the most challenging. So people will notice his chapter is the very last chapter in this book.
Yes.
What was helpful is to learn about other people's struggle, what they went through, what their families have done to try to get justice for them. People like James, who's in our first chapter. In my first chapter, his niece Tanya, who decided that she was going to fight for her family, took on a similar role of justice for her family like I did for mine. And when I've had conversations with her, I felt inspired by her. There's so many people in this book that I feel inspired by their stories. And for those who I may not have had enough information on, maybe it was just one headline, but there was maybe a mental health issue. That's where I talked to Dr. Drew about. What can we do? Because we know that there is a mental health crisis in this country as well. What can we do to prevent those kind of scenarios from being in play where someone loses their life? We don't want to see that.
Well, one of the things I liked, speaking of Tanya and other family members throughout the different chapters, they are doing things in their community for their loved one, but you've given them a public voice.
Yes.
So now all these people who are reading your book are hearing their stories when they might not have been able to know about their stories. They were just a headline. So thank you for that. In the intro, I talked about your childhood, raised by your grandmother, not the easiest of childhoods. And in your book, you actually discuss ways in which people, including yourself, who have disadvantages are able to break that cycle. What is your advice for that?
Well, I'm fortunate to have grown up in a very Christian family, and I believe with God, all things are possible. And I'm honored to have my aunt in the audience today, who, if you read my first book, you're very familiar with her and our conversations on God and the Word of God and how it has enormous power to it in the spoken form. And I believe God's Word has transformed my life. So as you mentioned these many accolades, working at Fox News Channel, and I started there in my 20s. Many of the other things that I've done in my life, I know without God, it wouldn't have been possible. So I'm incredibly honored for God's presence in my life daily. I'm incredibly honored for the folks who surround me in prayer. Thank you all, because I get messages from all over the country, even all over the world. People saying, I'm praying for you, keep going. I'm praying for your family, I'm covering you. I meet people on the street that give me a hug and cry and say, like, I've been praying for you. And it's something about that power. God's power can create new life into any situation. And if you're not a believer, I encourage you to get to know God because He will change your life for the better.
So you talk about giving names to these victims. And I know someone whose brother was murdered, and he was never mentioned by his name in the papers and the news stories because he was not the intended victim. So he's always mentioned as the person's friend. So I wonder, and it upsets the family because he had a name. So he has a name.
Yes.
Does it ever bother you that Christian is known as Gianno Caldwell's brother and not as Christian?
It doesn't. And the reason for that is, I'm a conservative. I think everybody is aware of that by now, right? But we typically don't have a lot of stories in our movement of people who have been murdered. We usually don't see that. And the fact that people can put a face to it and say, like, I know Gianno Caldwell. I watch him on TV all the time. I know exactly who he is, and I'm so sorry about his brother. It allows people to have even more empathy for the situation, and not just for me and my family, but other people around them. So if you read the book, you'll notice out of the 8 families there outside of my family, not all of them are black. I got white folks in there, Hispanic folks. I got all colors of people and races and demographic because I want people to have empathy for this story. This isn't just about, black on black crime, which does exist. We know that, we recognize that. But this is about Americans uniting together to stop what can impact any and every one of us. You know, I saw this clip of me. I was on air one day, and this was right after, like literally weeks after I saw this, after my brother was murdered. And then somebody had played this collage of clips, and maybe a week, I think it was a week before my brother was murdered, I said on air, I was talking about violent crime, and I said, this can happen to any one of us. This could happen to my family. And the very next week, it happened. And I didn't realize that I said it. I'm on TV. I say a lot of things, you know, like I can't follow and track, but I'm like, wow, how did that happen? But now people know that there's a realistic crime crisis here, and we got to get active. We have to change the landscape. We have to ensure that we're supporting folks who are anti-crime candidates, and that's why I started the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety, caldwellinstitute.org if you want to learn more about what we're doing there, or the Caldwell Foundation for Public Safety, caldwellsafety.org, which we've worked on programming for schools that educate the youth on violence and crime prevention, et cetera. But these are a set of circumstances that I think can be preventable if we have the right people in charge. Now, does that mean everyone can be saved? No, certainly not. But if you have folks like Nathan Hochman as an example, in Los Angeles, we supported Nathan Hochman's candidacy. Yeah, we're here in Los Angeles, I just thought about that. We supported his candidacy, we got behind him, we did ad buys, we did op-eds, we did media appearances. We supported him because he was the right person for the right moment, and George Gascon was an absolute disaster. You think about some of the people that he did not recommend enhancements for, who've committed atrocious crimes. There was a Mexican mafia gang member who premeditated killed 2 people. And in the state of California, if you have ties to organized crime, just criminal activity, you have a history of violence, they're supposed to recommend enhancements so you get more time. There's been multiple people that George Gascon did not recommend enhancements for. There's been multiple people who've committed crimes and were let out of jail, and they went and committed even crazier crimes. They've murdered people. That cannot happen. That is not the society I want to live in. That cannot be. You cannot be in a place where you go downtown Los Angeles, you're watching your back because you don't know what's coming to you. Not only that, you may see somebody defecating right in front of you. It's a tremendous problem, but it's one that needs to be cleaned up, and with the right people, you can do it.
Now, obviously, it's not easy to sometimes move a needle. Have you seen any change? Have you seen any differences in what you're trying to do?
I have seen some changes.
Okay.
I've seen tremendous awareness.
Good.
I've had candidates that have come to me and said that I've inspired them to run for political office, and they want to be a part of the solution. And I'm very appreciative of that. And this right here, the day my brother was murdered, my journey through America's violent crime crisis, is meant to be a manual for change.
Maybe I shouldn't ask this, but do you ever consider running for public office?
Well, you know, Sean Hannity has called me many times and said, you gotta run.
Yeah.
You know, Sean Hannity is my big brother. I talk about him in the book a lot and how he's been extraordinarily supportive of me. And when this happened, Sean would call me multiple times a week. We'll be on the phone for an hour plus. How are you doing? How's your family doing? And he's encouraged me to run, and a lot of other folks have encouraged me to run as well. So I think for me, whatever God says, if this is where he's leading me, then I'll take it on. But right now, my focus is on saving lives through the Institute and ensuring people are aware that they have a choice.
So in your book, you do blend very personal narratives of your own story and other stories with broader political critique. How were you able to strike that balance?
Well, I thought it was necessary for people to understand, and I wanted to have people understand it from my voice, one in which has experienced tragedy, but not living in a tragic moment. And I think that's an important distinction because, as I mentioned before, you can have a situation like this happen and it can totally defeat you. My grandmother, after this happened, she didn't even go to the funeral because she wanted to remember him how he was. And then there was also a concern that if she saw him in a casket, that she might die. Man, that's such a powerful thing to hear. But I can see how it can be very real for people. I met this lovely couple there in the audience today as I was coming in, and I was informed about the tragic loss of a cousin. And it kind of broke me in the moment to even hear that, because you don't usually see the face of people like that have experienced such a tragedy. But it's one in which I think we can turn that pain into purpose. Mm-hmm. We can legitimately change the landscape for everyone around us. But it takes our voice to make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. So a little bit ago, you were mentioning the different people in the book, and you mentioned Malik. In that chapter, you actually discuss Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
And I'm going to read this because it's from your book. You write, "If we don't address the real dangers, what good is the movement? Can we truly say we are fighting for Black lives if we're only willing to tackle the most politically convenient villains?"
And that's absolutely accurate.
Can you share what you meant by that?
Absolutely accurate. The Black Lives Matter movement, as we know it, because I think there's two different illustrations of it. It's the organization, and there's people saying that my life matters. Mm-hmm. All lives matter, mm-hmm. Like point blank period. If you're white, black, Hispanic, it doesn't make a difference. Your life matters. And we know that the BLM movement, they collected all of these different donations. They didn't support the community efforts. They went and bought mansions. Mm-hmm. It was all of these terrible things that was going on that people told the world was going to happen, and it actually did. So I'm not about these political movements. I'm about real justice for real people. That means if you're black and you pick up a weapon and you kill another black person, you should face time. If you're white and you kill another white person, you should face time. Race doesn't matter in that arena. We gotta be about justice for all people, no matter what your race, no matter what you believe, no matter what your ideology is, because whether you be a conservative, a liberal, or independent, your life matters.
Amen, yeah. Right? The other thing you talk about, which is a hot button, is everyone's talking about defunding the police.
Yeah.
And you say not only should we not defund the police, we should fund the police.
Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and you know what's kind of interesting about that is we got this socialist Democrat running for mayor in New York.
I know.
who said that the police should be defunded. And actually, he voted to defund the police in 2020 after George Floyd. So he's done that, and he wants to abolish prisons and all this other nonsense. And then the interesting part is a number of cities did this. Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, they defunded the police department. And what did it lead to? Death and destruction. So it's insane to do that. It's insane to say, I'm gonna replace police officers with, what is it, social,
yeah.
Exactly, like, who thinks to do this? It's like the most insane voices that become amplified, the AOCs of the world. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And partially, I believe that's why Donald Trump won the 2024 election, because there was a lot of insanity going on the left. You're talking about biological boys and women's sports. There was a public safety issue. People were concerned about the economy. Immigration was a big issue, and the crime that sprung up from that. So there was a lot to consider. So we cannot be saying defund the police when these are the people that protect us. And interestingly enough, in the most dangerous neighborhoods, the citizens there want more police, not less.
Right, right. Speaking of being a vocal advocate, what do you believe is the most misunderstood aspect of America's violent crime today?
That it's an issue that only impacts one particular group of people. It impacts all of us. Right. And I want to be very clear about that. Like I mentioned in the book, I write about all demographics of people in here. And for that very reason, because we all have to unite no matter what we believe about another group of people, we have to be able to say, no, wrong is wrong. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really thankful for from somebody like Pam Bondi, who joined our board early on. She's been a vocal advocate for keeping America safe. And when I talk to her or when I text her and we have these discussions, as I was in the Oval Office with her when she got sworn in, when we had these discussions, she's like, okay, Gianno, I believe what you're doing is the right thing, and I want to help you and amplify your voice through that, which I'm very greatly appreciative of. Because if you don't have the right people in place, as I mentioned, she's not an elected official, but if you don't have the right people in place, then you might not be able to change much. And we saw that over 4 years with Biden.
Right. Now, you mentioned that you obviously the murder of your brother didn't cause you to focus on violent crime and changing things. You've been talking about it for a long time. You were even on air a week before he died. But since the tragic loss of your brother, has your approach to covering issues like crime in media changed at all?
It has, and thank you to the Fox News family who allowed me to go out and interview family members who've had family members die violently, help raise money for funerals, get them help and support, which became, for me, a little bit of a blueprint for the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety. As I mentioned, we got prosecutors, former prosecutors, we got police chiefs on our board, we have members of Congress that are on our board. And what I did with them is I said, look, you know, I had these experiences working with the police and the prosecutors, and it was a very difficult experience. And I had no knowledge that this was going to be the case initially, but I wanted them to put together a manual of sorts to educate people when they're going through these tragedies, what can they do? So we got manuals on our website, again, caldwellinstitute.org, where you can read about how do I work with the police and prosecutors to get the best outcome for my family tragedy. Dr. Drew wrote a great manual on mental health, and when these things happen, what do you do? Additionally, I wrote a manual on how to work with the press, how can you generate interest around your family member. Those things are very necessary when you experience that. I hope you don't have to use any of those resources, but they are available to you and your family members, because it's necessary at this day and age to be an action-based person.
I mean, obviously, you're a member of the media with a public face, so maybe it's a little bit easier, but how are you getting the awareness out there of all these amazing resources on your website?
Well, I utilize the media channels. Social media is a really good vehicle. And, you know, some of you might be here because you heard me on Fox News talking about this event, which I'm glad that you're here. Thank you for coming. So the media has been a really big driver for me. The Fox News channel has been extraordinarily supportive, the New York Post and many other outlets. But unfortunately, though, one of the things I've come to realize is when I talk about these issues to some places that may be on the left side of things, they're not really too interested in hearing about it. It's just like President Obama. You're from Chicago. You lived there for many, many years. You were president for 8 years. How many times did he talk about Chicago and fixing the issues that exist there? We didn't really hear him talk about that. Why? Why is that the case? Because what I've come to learn is on the left, if they can't politicize it, they have no interest. If they can't say like, oh yeah, the Republicans are at fault for this, they don't have much of an interest, because it's their policies that have enabled much of this crime crisis. Now, I'm not saying they're to blame for absolutely everything. That's not the case. But in this instance, if you're going to have something like the Safety Act in Illinois as an example, the Safety Act it eliminated cash bail throughout the entire state of Illinois. So for doing things like murder, as an example, you may get an ankle monitor bracelet. You know, remember those that go on your ankle? And they will sit you at home. But the Safety Act, which created this new avenue for this ankle monitor bracelet, whereas if you are out of range, which it used to be if you're out of range, they would call you, hey, where are you? They would come by your house. The police cannot respond to someone being out of range on their ankle monitor bracelet for 72 hours.
The person could be anywhere.
You've killed the witness at that point. You know, what is this? It's insanity. That's what it is. It's insanity. But again, when you amplify these voices, which I find to be very dangerous voices, this is the kind of policy that comes out of it. So you look at places like California. I know y'all love where y'all live. I hope that California can be saved. Steve Hilton may be a great candidate for you all. Like Steve Hilton.
He was just here.
He was just here recently.
He was just here.
You need somebody who really is interested in the job, not interested in just supporting their donors, not interested in ensuring that they look good and they have a viral moment or they make a ton of money when they leave office. You want somebody who's there that's willing to sacrifice everything for the people in which they serve. And we don't have too many leaders like that these days.
There's something in your book that really hit with me. You wrote, "The system isn't built for the victims or for their families." Who would you say the system is built for?
Well, it's largely, for the most part, it's been for criminals. And, they've taken this idea of criminal justice reform, which I think is noble, and they made it about justice for the criminal. And that's the problem. Victims are crying out all across this country. They want to be heard. We need to talk about victim rights. They need to have an opportunity when the prosecutor is giving these plea deals to give an opinion on them, I believe. And that's something that we're working on right now with the Heritage Foundation, a new victim rights bill.
Okay.
So they can be a part of that process so their families can be heard. No one wants to be a part of tragedy, but so many families are, and then they're left without a voice. They don't have any fighters unless somebody springs up out of nowhere, if you will, or a family member decides that they're gonna be that marching band. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. So you think about places like Chicago, where I write about baby Cecilia. Baby Cecilia was 5 months old on June 24th. She was in a car with her parents up front and her baby brother, 3 years old. They hear a pop. They thought it was fireworks. Baby Cecilia was shot in the head. She was 4 days away from her being 6 months old. Their family couldn't fight. They didn't have it in them, and I don't blame them. But there's people in this story, like Pastor Price, who met them on that day, who would go out. He was a street pastor, but he would find out about these murders in Chicago, and he would go to the hospital to try to be with the family. And on this day that this happened, he was with that family, and he became their spokesperson. Mm-hmm. He became their fighter.
Yeah.
And, thank God for the people who answered the call. Thank God for the people that answered the call.
Are you finding that Congress is open to listen to the need for changes?
Absolutely. In fact, we just had last month, Congressman Burgess Owens entered in Public Safety Awareness Day, which is a first start. So that's in legislation now. We're pushing that. That's going to be June 24th for next year. So we'll have a public designation there. We're talking about how can we have a violent crime package legislatively. I think there's a lot of people that are open to hearing, and there was a lot of people who I may not have ever met. Maybe I met them in passing in a green room of Fox or whatever the case may be, who've called me, who've reached out and said, hey, I want to be helpful, what can I do? And those folks, those legislators, and I think now is a really important time because we're right before the midterms, those folks, they want to do something. They want to be a part of a movement that can help solve this violent crime crisis across the country. So there's a lot of people, I think, that are silent heroes that you may never hear about, but they're willing to answer the call, and there's many of those folks in Congress today who are willing to answer the call too. They just need somebody to show them why it needs to be a movement of now, why there's urgency now.
So you talked about a little bit ago, you've had an amazing support system from Sean Hannity to Dr. Drew Pinsky.
Yes.
And in your book, this is me paraphrasing your words, but you were addressing the grief over the loss of your brother, and you were talking to Dr. Drew.
Yes.
And he said to you, you honor the lost person by making a difference, by being their voice, by becoming proactive. Well, clearly you're becoming proactive. You're writing this book. You're talking about it. But how have you turned that advice really into what your drivers are today?
And so that was his response to my question, how do I move beyond this moment? How do I come to receive some peace? And when I said, how do I move beyond this moment? He said, unfortunately, you really don't. He said, what you want to do is do something that honors their legacy. And that's what the Caldwell Institute was all about. I have not really grieved my brother's death in 3 years.
I believe it.
When it happened, I was on television all the time, still on television talking about my brother. We had, thanks to Fox News, Lawrence Jones came out right outside the funeral. We set up camera shop. I talked about him. Pastor Corey Brooks from Chicago came out. And, I didn't necessarily want to have cameras at my brother's funeral, but the people who did it out there, no choice for me. And when we left the funeral, there were a ton of cameras outside from just different places. So, I just think that Dr. Drew's advice was so sage, and it's provided a little bit of meaning. So maybe not necessarily grieving like everybody else, but turning that pain into real purpose has been extraordinarily helpful for me, and it's provided me a bit of peace. But I have to keep going, and that's what I feel, an urgency to keep going. I can't stop.
And how is your family doing? Your aunt's with us today, but how is your family doing?
It's
day by day.
Yeah, like I said, for me, the difference is I'm doing something actively, and for them, they're living with it. And, I can't blame them for how they decide to grieve. You grieve on your own. You grieve how you decide you want to grieve. But they're not in 3 years, they're not in better shape. I talked to my grandmother. I mentioned my brother's name. She's in tears. And of course, I'm sure many of you all see me on television in tears regularly, like even now, But I got to tell you though, there are better days ahead, I believe.
Good. There's a couple things. There were a lot of things in your books that shocked me, and one you actually had a graph in your book. It compared the United States to other countries like France and Canada, the United Kingdom, and it showed how high our unsolved homicides are compared to other countries. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a couple reasons. One, there is a no-snitch culture that exists in many of these urban areas. As many of you all know, people don't believe in working with the police. When I say you should snitch, honestly, I think you should talk. And honestly, growing up in Chicago like I did, this culture was enormous. And during that time, if, say for example, someone shot an innocent person, the gangs would go and find out who that person was, and they would either turn them into the police or it would be street justice. Now it's not like that. It's more like the Wild Wild West. So if someone is shot and you go and snitch, your family, something can happen to them. But if you don't go and tell, something can happen to them. So either or, you might as well just work with the police and try to get the criminals put away. That's the only way this really can work. If people don't believe that there's accountability, if there's no accountability for folks' actions, it is legitimately Gotham City. And in many cities across the nation, that's what we're experiencing. Los Angeles, obviously Nathan has come in now, and now there's more accountability, but you still got a mayor, Karen Bass, who doesn't believe in accountability, apparently. We saw what happened with the ICE protest. Yeah. I mean, this is insane. I watch it on television, and I'm like, wait a second. Obama deported more people than Trump. Biden, he's obviously let, 12 million people in, but he deported a lot of folks. So why, with all the protests, this is completely political, but they let folks run wild and destroy their own neighborhoods. How does that make sense? Right. How do you get any form of justice by destroying your own stuff? You don't.
You don't. Have you seen any changes in the south side of Chicago since this happened?
The changes that I've seen with Mayor Brandon Johnson, which I didn't think could, we had Lori Lightfoot. Y'all remember Lori Lightfoot? Did anybody, you heard her name? Former mayor of Chicago? I honestly didn't think it can get worse than her, but I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. Brandon Johnson, he says things like, oh, we can't go out demonizing kids. Well, if you're gonna take someone's life, you gotta hold these kids accountable. But for them, Lori Lightfoot and then Brandon Johnson, which they have this policy in Chicago called the no chase policy. So if the police, they can witness somebody committing a crime, they have to call into their supervisors to get permission to chase them on foot or in their car. Wow. It's insanity. Wow. So there's not been a lot of change that I've seen there, outside of the fact that they have a new district attorney who's now taking things seriously, unlike Kim Foxx, which y'all heard of Kim Foxx? Okay, a lot of people know. Y'all know the Chicago politics pretty well. Is this some Chicago people here? Oh, one Chicago guy, okay. You see it, okay. He said, I watch Fox News.
Exactly.
Getting informed. But yeah, since the new prosecutor has come in, who's a former judge, who's apparently a bit tougher on crime, and since she's come in, there's been a little bit of change, but you're gonna have to change this administration. You're gonna have to really be tough when it comes to crime, and that's one of the things. If I were to run for mayor of Chicago, this is probably gonna be a one-term situation, because I'm coming in and I would be very tough on crime. Right. And that would be my number one issue, because too many lives are being lost. And it's unfortunate. There's so much potential in the city of Chicago or in Los Angeles or in New York or many of the other places around the country. There's so much potential. The harsh reality is much of that potential lives in graveyards across these cities because their lives have been lost. People like Malik, honor roll student, good kid, and he loses his life. Christian, my little brother, loses his life. And that's why it's really tough for many, many families to move on, especially when I remember I was trying to interview this mom in Chicago, and the network had sent producers, they're calling her, they're emailing, they're doing all these things. And I said, I want to interview this lady because she had multiple sons murdered. But you know how many cases like that are in places like Chicago? There's a lot. They had multiple family members, literal sons. And in this particular instance, she had multiple sons murdered on the same block. Ugh. So this is the harsh reality in which we live in, and until there's loud enough voices, nothing changes.
Now, at the time of the publishing of your book, there had not been any movement in your brother's case.
Yes.
Has any been made since this book? I know the book's brand new, but anything new?
Nothing new. And for folks who, the theories of this case and what I've been told, there was two individuals that were fighting, and we call them gangways. They're in between houses in Chicago, so we call them gangways. And one guy got beat up really badly. And I've seen the video to this. It looked like it was a movie. I couldn't believe it. So the person that recorded this fight put it on Facebook. And the guy found out, the one who got beat up really badly, and he tried to murder the guy that put it on Facebook because he was embarrassed. So on the day that my brother was murdered, June 24th, he happened to be standing next to the guy who put this video on Facebook. So there was 3 to 4 men jumped out of a SUV, black SUV, and they shot everybody, a young lady that was there included. And the guy who they wanted, I guess they shot him like a dozen or more times. He ended up living. He had to have multiple surgeries that day and then weeks later. And then it's like, wow, my brother only got shot, I think it was like a few times, but he didn't live. And it's like, people ask the question, why God? And, I've had those moments where I'm like, why did this happen to my little brother? But I'm assured that his purpose and legacy will mean greater and save many lives. And I think, honestly, that's a legacy worth having. If you can save lives from your story, that's an important legacy, and I think that's one that he would greatly appreciate.
That's amazing.
Y'all can clap it up.
Yeah, honestly.
Thank you. That was so kind of you.
And then my last question, which follows up with what you just said, and then we're going to turn to the audience for a few questions. Your brother's life was short, but it was important. Is there anything about his life or about him that you have not shared yet in this conversation that you would like our audience to know?
Some time back, I remember that a call he made to me, and he was telling me how dangerous the city was. And he was saying, this is so bad out here, and I have so many friends that have been murdered. And he said, I want to move to California. And he came out here shortly after, moved him out here, but he missed my grandmother. Yeah. And that was his reason for returning back. He's like, I want to be there to help her. She's elderly. And he said, I want to help her. And this is my grandmother. My mom was addicted to drugs, unfortunately. And my grandmother took us in very, very young. So I was maybe about 10, I believe, when my mother gave over temporary custody of us while she went to go get rehabilitated. And when she did that, my mother continued to have children while she was on drugs. So my grandmother, she would take them in, and Christian was one of those kids she had when she was on drugs. And she nursed him back to good health. So that bond was extremely important to him. And, I think for him, if he if he knew what would have happened, he probably would have still chosen to go back to Chicago to love on, support, and help my grandmother. And that's the kind of kid he was. Big heart, really loved, beloved in his community, and he just wanted to help people, but especially help the person that's helped his life so much. And it's helped all of us. And I may not agree with everything that my grandmother would say in terms of him and wanting him to be back in Chicago, because I was very much against it. I said, why would you have him go back? All this danger going on. And she said, well, I need his help. But I think that he, knowing that he was able to spend more time with her and help her, that he would love the fact that he was able to spend that time. And I can't be upset about that. And, I just wish that I had more time with him.
Of course.
I wish that I could have took him to college. Because at 16, he asked me to take him on a college tour, and we went to UCLA. I wish I could have took him to college. I wish I could have saw him get married. But through this work, his life will make so much difference in the lives of others. So I'm honored by that fact.
Yeah, and as you said, right, he wanted to help others, and now through his story, you are helping others through his life. So thank you for that.
Thank you, no choice, thank you.
Absolutely. So we are going to turn to the audience. We have staff with microphones, so please wait for a microphone to come to you so we can catch it. Karen, there's one right up front.
Hi there, thank you for being here. I've got two quick political questions for you. It seems like optics have a lot to do with who we vote for.
Yes.
For example, California is a big Democratic state, and people can't get past being wrong, so they vote Democrat no matter what, with both mayor and governor. And Karen Bass has been really a big failure. We had another candidate, Rick Caruso, who used to be Republican. Now he's a Democrat, but people would not vote for him because he used to be, quote, a Republican.
Yeah.
How do we get past that? That's the first question. Second question is, if Mondavi wins, would that be the end of the Democratic Party in New York? Because I'll donate if that tomorrow.
These are great questions. And yes, it reminds me of Paul Vallis, who ran in the Chicago mayoral's election. I guess he made some comments that were positive about Trump, but he was a Democrat through and through. And that was part of the reason why Brandon Johnson, he won. That was part of that reason. And it's unfortunate because people are waking up to the fact that you can't think about political parties in the sense that I have to vote for somebody because of my party. You should be thinking about, I need to vote for the individual. And, you got Republicans who are great, and you got some Republicans who aren't so great. You got Democrats who aren't so great, and then you got some Democrats. Right, yeah, you got me there. You might find one that may make a heroic move and vote for something or say something. But yeah, it is largely about optics, and it's unfortunate. But I think when people continue to get the same bad results, that some folks wake up, some folks decide to either become independent or they become Republicans, and then others are kind of lost. And it's kind of what it is. Like, I think about the fact that when I was in Chicago growing up, people are so in your face on the politics. Like, they talk about it in school. The teachers would say Republicans are bad. The churches would say Republicans are bad. Like, everywhere you go, like, it's the same message. So if you grow up in this, what are you gonna think? Republicans are bad, right? You don't have any, this is what you're always getting. Until I learned about having a conversation with this African-American gentleman on the streets of Chicago one day who began to push back against that kind of rhetoric. He was a Democrat, but when he pushed back against me, and this was when I was in my way younger years, I did research on the Republican Party, and I learned in 1854 the party was established in opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which wanted to expand slavery. I learned that Republicans were behind every civil rights bill. I learned about the Democratic Party being behind slavery and Jim Crow and the KKK and all those different things. So it takes education. And that's why I tell, and I have been saying for 2 decades, I've been a Republican, you gotta go into these communities. You cannot just pull back when they call you a racist, which is what they normally do. And that's how they keep people from going in. Trump went into the Bronx. He went into a lot of neighborhoods that they didn't want him in, and people had a chance to meet him for themselves, to hear from him directly, and that's what Republicans must do. On the Mamdani issue, it's interesting because we've been talking about him so much and how bad his policies are, and he doesn't even seemingly like Jews, which Jews make up a large percent. You're a Jew too. Make up a large. I don't know what's going on with Jews. They keep voting for Democrats. It doesn't make. But there are some that are. Like I know some Jews. I got some Jewish friends who've been nonstop voting for Democrats until October 7th, and then people say, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore because of the rhetoric that's come from the Democratic Party, which has been rather unfortunate for your people, and I'm so sorry what has happened. So what is going to happen with Mamdani? If he wins, I think it's going to be the end of New York. But I think there's a lot of Democrats who are now coming out to embrace him, which is insane, because the financial industry is going to suffer, Wall Street is going to suffer, and fortunately, I guess for somebody like me who lives in Miami, who wants good people in Florida, he's going to be Florida's #1 realtor. That's literally what it's going to come down to.
What do you think his chances are?
It's going to be a tough one, because people are going to vote for him just because he's a Democrat. No matter what his policies are, it doesn't matter. And then there's going to be a splitting of the vote between Eric Adams and then Andrew Cuomo. And I never would have thought that I would ever be able to say that Andrew Cuomo would be the better candidate. Like, who thinks that? Right. We know Janice Dean. Y'all love Janice Dean, don't you? You know about her grandparents. Not her grandparents, her parents-in-laws, her in-laws. There's been a lot of damage she's done. So there's going to be splitting of the vote with Eric, Cuomo, and Mamdani. But the good news, I think, for those other candidates is during the primary, it was low voter turnout. We're going to have very high voter turnout, excuse me. And then there's also 50 people who made $50,000 and under rejected him by 30 points. African Americans rejected him. Hispanics rejected him. So there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be educated on this race. So it's kind of a toss-up at this point in my view.
Interesting. Lots of hands. We'll go back to Erica.
Oh, okay, thank you. You mentioned Cuomo. I think he recently said that if he loses, he's moving to Florida, so he might be your neighbor.
And he'll probably vote Republican.
With your background experience with your mother being addicted and your grandmother taking care of the family, you have a lot of similarities in certain ways with J.D. Vance. Have you ever met or talked with him?
No, actually, I haven't talked to J.D., but I did reach out to him when his book, Hillbilly LG, came out, as I was working on Taken for Granted, How Conservatism Can Win Back the Americans That Liberalism Failed. So I reached out to him, never spoken with him. But, I think his story is a great American story, and I think it shed light on what was going on in other communities outside of urban centers. Because there's people in the Appalachian region that are suffering. There's a lot of folks that are on welfare. There's a lot of folks on drugs in these many areas. People more so talk about the big cities, but there are people hurting in the small towns too. And, that was one of the reasons why with my new book, I wanted to write about some of those stories too, because as a country, we all need to come together, no matter if you're in an urban center, you're in a small town, if you're in a trailer park or the hood. We all got to come together to make a difference for the community around us.
Hello, thank you so much for coming. I'm a Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney, and I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support of Nathan Hochman, my new boss.
He's great.
He is fantastic, and it has been a complete 180 in our office. You have saved not only my fellow prosecutors and myself, but the good citizens of Los Angeles County from the nightmare of George Gascon that we had to endure for 4 years. And it's true, what you had mentioned. He deliberately ordered us to not file certain enhancements, not file certain counts, not file certain allegations, things of that nature. So what you're doing is, I just want to say that you're making a difference.
Thank you.
You helped in terms of of getting rid of that nightmare that was George Gascon, and forever indebted to you. Thank you.
No, thank you. Sincerely, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we got a witness here on how bad George was internally. And a lot of people actually resigned from your office because of how bad he was. And thank you for sticking around and ensuring that law and order could be the rule of the day. Thank you.
And we're going back there.
People like Charlie Kirk say that Generation Z is becoming more conservative. Do you agree with that?
That's the numbers show that. The data proves that out. If you look at the last election, you see a great uptick. And the interesting part is Generation Z was one in which we thought was going to be like the crazier generation. I'm a millennial, so we thought after them they were just going to be very crazy. But the thing about it is, you keep in mind, Generation Z, they lived through COVID, the government restrictions, they lived through, what was the economic meltdown after meltdown. They couldn't go to their proms, they couldn't go to their graduations and all these different things. So a lot of them became more conservative because, as an example, in the state of California, you know, like during COVID, many of the policies were more political versus medical based. We saw that in many places around the country, not Florida. But yeah, that is very true, and I'm grateful for what Charlie has been doing to rally those folks and educate them to what's going on and how they can make a difference in this new era.
Karen, there's a question up in the front here as well, or Erica got it.
So I think back to when George H.W. was running against Dukakis. And there was a question in the debate. It was about, I don't know if it was death penalty or it was some extreme penalties for rape. And the moderator asked Governor Dukakis, what if this had happened to your wife? What if your wife had been raped? Because he was soft on crime.
Yeah.
And he did this rambling response, and I think that ended it for him. I often think, what if something happened to these Democratic leaders in their families? You know, the horrific, you know, which you've had to go through. What do you think would happen? Would the light bulb go off in their head if they had a personal experience with horrific crime?
You know what, that's a really interesting question, and I had this experience. State Rep LaShawn Ford out of Chicago, he actually experienced this in his own family, Democrat through and through, voted for all the soft on crime policies, and I believe it was his niece, we did a story on him, was murdered outside of his home. And after that happened, he said, you know what, I can't do it anymore. It was a wake-up call for him. And you know, it's unfortunate that it has to happen to you for you to wake up. But that's the reality of the policies in which he supported over the years. Those kind of things happen. So, you know, I'm not wishing ill on anyone, of course, but yes, there sometimes is a wake-up call, but then some people double down on it. We saw with the previous election, with the polling, things just kept getting bad on the immigration front for the Democrats. People were fed up with it. You're usurping resources from American citizens, and in some places that are highly impoverished. So now, all of a sudden, your kid can't go to some summer camp because they got to take the funding there to take care of the migrants. That was something that really negatively impacted a lot of people. But you know what? Despite the polling, they kept going, and then they lost and said, you know what? Maybe we need to rethink some of this. But then they doubled down. So I don't understand how that happens. But with some people, it would be a wake-up call for them.
I think we have time for one more question. If anyone, over there.
Oh, there we go. We got a.
Okay, over here.
Hi.
This is true. Last night we watched the documentary of Reagan, and it was really great. My 30-year-old son here and my parents that are 80 watched it. We saw portions of it, showed clips of him, Reagan, with Tip O'Neill, that they were so contrary and opposite in every way, and yet they respected each other.
Yeah.
So what do you think? How can we prevent this deep polarization that happens?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for that. And as you mentioned, the former president and Tip O'Neill, I think of Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton. I think about 96 welfare reform that they did together. And there was some respect there and some, it was just a different era. And I'm hopeful that we're not beyond that era, but things have been made very difficult. I've lost friends because of my support of the Republican Party, of who I voted for, and I voted for Trump. Like that's just the reality. I voted for Trump and I voted on public safety, law and order. But there's people who say, you know what, I'm not gonna be friends with you anymore. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I think it happens more on the left than it does on the right. Because I can be friends with a Democrat, I don't have a problem. So long as you're not nuts. You can't be
There's a line.
You can't be too crazy. Like sometimes it's just outrageous. But I don't have a problem being friends with somebody on the left. I think we are better as people if we can exchange ideas and challenge each other. Maybe you have a good opinion on that, and I think that's one of the things that make President Trump very unique, is because he'll actually listen to Democrats. If they got a plan, he'll listen to Fetterman if you got something good or interesting to say. So he's not an ideologue, and I can appreciate that. And I think that's what we need to get. We need to get back to that place where we can all be friends, regardless if we agree on one political issue or another. But as you mentioned, the polarization has taken over quite deeply, I think, especially since around 2016 and then COVID. You remember how many of your friends and family that said, if you're not, vaccinated and boosted, we don't want to see you, we don't want to be around you. And, I remember hearing Fauci say, if you get it, you won't get COVID. And that wasn't true, and a number of different things that wasn't true. But that was the case. People didn't want you around their friends and family. I think we need to pull back from that. And I think we need to look at each other more as Americans. You are my brother, you are my sister, no matter what your color is, no matter what your political affiliation is, no matter how much money you make. If you're a good human being, you are my brother and you're my sister. And that's the America that I want to live in.
That was a great way to end this.
Well, thank you.
That was a great way to end this.
Thank you so much.
For those of you who have not already purchased a book, we are selling them. I highly recommend you purchase one. It gives the voice to these, 8 of the 150, but of all the, right, so many people lose their lives to violence, and it gives the voice to a handful of those families, a handful of those victims, and really talks about the violence in America and how to make a difference. So thank you. It's not easy to sit here and talk about your brother, but you are making change, and we thank you. And perhaps next time you're here, you are Mayor Caldwell, Governor Caldwell, or right. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all for coming.